Well, good morning, church. Great to see everybody here today. If you're a guest with us here today, my name is Brad. I serve as lead pastor here at Anthem. And if somebody brought you here today and you're sitting with them, we're so glad that you're here. Or if you found us online or were driving by and decided to come this morning, we know that God's got a word for everybody here today. Super excited about the message and what we're going to be talking about here this morning. We're actually continuing the series we started last week of conversations that we're having around our church, around the series called Life's Too Short. You know, the reality is life is so short. As parents, I heard somebody say recently that the days are long, but the years are short. Meaning that the days are long, like you don't sleep a lot, there's a lot happening every day, but the years are short till they move out of the house. Some of you that raised your kids, you know that to be true. The days are long, but the years are short. And the truth is, in our lives, that often that's the case as well, that we go through things and seasons, and a moment can feel like it's taking a long time, but the years are short, and life's too short to be stuck giving ourselves to lesser things, to being weighed down by the pains of this life, about dealing with worry and comparison. So we're dealing with all these big topics that apply to you and they apply to me. And they're so important. They're not just another conversation, not just another time at church, because these things are the kind of things that can ensnare your future. They can hold you captive and not allow you to become the man or the woman that you were created to be, or not fulfill the purpose that you were created to fulfill, or not experience the joy and the happiness that God desires for his children to experience in the midst of this life that we live all around us. This is big stuff. And so during this series, we're dealing with issues like comparison, like we dealt with last week, and worry and fear, and not being sure whether to step out, or our priorities, all those things that are important to this conversation about life. And you're living life right now. And if you have breath in your lungs, there's a reason that you have breath in your lungs. Something to fulfill, a difference to make in the world around you. And so life's too short to get off track of the direction that God has mapped out for your life. And so we're having some big conversation around our church right now. Last week we talked about comparison. Today we're going to continue this series with Life's Too Short to have just an incredible conversation about to hold a grudge. In fact, that's my title, my subject, my mission here this morning is to help you understand that life's too short to hold a grudge, and that to let go of that grudge can actually lead you to the life that is truly life if you can let go of the pain and the hurt that has been done against you or around you and that you've encountered in your life. I was thinking, if you have a Bible this morning, first of all, you can turn with me to Genesis chapter 45. It's going to take me a while to get there in the message today, but that's our key, where we're going to focus in on this one moment in Joseph's life and how he decided to give up holding a grudge against all those who had hurt him. Thinking about pain, and thinking about in a room this size, in a city this size, in a world this size, the world is full of hurt, isn't it? I was thinking about the stories I know about people around our church and things that have happened and my own experience in life and the different kind of pain that people deal with. And I was thinking some of you in this room grew up with a lot of pain. Maybe you grew up in a household of family that mistreated you in some way. Maybe a father was harsh or wasn't present, or a mother wasn't able to stand with you and you were mistreated in some way or overlooked in some way, or someone spoke things into your life that harmed you, and you began to carry that on your life because of the words that were spoken to you. I was thinking about abuse. Some of you have gone through abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. In fact, I heard a stat just a couple weeks ago that 20% of girls 18 and under are sexually abused before they hit 18. That is crushing. I've been talking to Christina a lot about that. I was like, you've got to read this, and you've got to read this. Can you imagine that's the reality all around the world? 20% of women under 18 sexually abused before they hit 18. That's just a crushing thing. The reality is pain is all around us, isn't it? This is going to be a conversation today that's about pain. It's going to be like a little introspective, and we're going to have to push us towards some freedom here in this room because of the things that we've gone through. I was thinking of other things that we've gone through: broken families, divorce, brokenness all around that, parents that weren't present. Maybe some of you are fostered or adopted or grew up in broken families. Others of us, someone broke your heart. someone you trusted. Maybe it was a marriage that ended in divorce, or a dating relationship, or a friendship, and someone broke your heart. You trusted them. You thought that you knew them. You knew what they were about, and yet in some way they ended up breaking your heart. Maybe it's a business associate, someone you thought was with you and doing the right things, but they weren't doing the right things, or they didn't have the interest of the company you were involved in, your relationship together. We have those things happen around us. Unexpected loss, death, the pain that comes with that, broken dreams, hopes never fulfilled, things you thought would happen that haven't ever happened and don't look like they're ever going to happen. These things, it's just life, isn't it? I wish it wasn't so. I wish life's too short to have any pain. That's the message I would like to give this morning, but that's not the reality of life. In fact, in this life, you will have pain, you will have suffering. Jesus said, as long as we're alive, we will encounter those things all in this life, and you've encountered it, and I've encountered it, and your details might be different than my details, and they're different than the details of the person next to you and the details of the person next to you, but what we have in common is we have experienced what it's like to have things not go the way they imagine. In fact, not only not gone the way they imagine, gone in a way that has harmed us deeply. And those harms that hit us deeply can affect every part of our lives. Don't you believe that? You know, like, I'm walking in pain, that impacts every relationship I have, every choice I make, everything that's in front of me. And it can be so hard when that happens in our life and we're carrying all this pain to offer up forgiveness or let go of those things, to not hold a grudge in our life. And here's what I want to start with, and that is that hurt is a painful thing, but hurt, when you hold on to it, can grow into something even more painful than the hurt that started it to begin with. That might be hard to believe, but if you ever walked with hurt for a long time, you know it hurt and it was bad, but walking with it day in, day out has lengthened all the journey, and it can cause something else to happen in our life altogether. To have the conversation we want to have today, I was praying through and thinking through people in the Bible, especially because we're always trying to get us back to God's word, point our eyes towards Jesus. He's the hero of our faith. The scriptures themselves guide us and help us to understand, learn from people's mistakes and people's good choices along the way. And I just kept thinking about the story of this man named Joseph in the Old Testament. And this morning what I want to do is I want to tell his story of pain and what he went through, because I think it's going to connect with us in this room. I think your pain's not going to be the same pain, but it's going to feel the same that it felt for him. And you're going to be able to enter into his story and see where he goes with the story, and it's going to impact you. To do that, we're going to have an illustration here this morning. I'm going to invite Brian Haley to come join me up on stage. Brian, can we put our hands together for Brian here this morning? By the way, it's Brian's birthday on Friday. He turned the big 4-0 right here. Isn't that good? It's great, Brian. Join the club, right? Yeah. I beat you to it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but here we are. I want you to wear this backpack here this morning and put this on, because we're going to talk about Joseph's life here this morning. You're going to stand in a little bit this morning for Joseph here in the room, and this backpack's going to represent all that's happened in his life that he's carrying with him. And you have that too. It's not a physical backpack, but it lives in your heart, right? That pain, the situations you've been to, the circumstances of your life. And it's often in life, the pains can pile up in our life if we're not careful. It can start to become heavier and heavier and heavier if we're not careful with the choices that we make around us. The story of Joseph, he's in the book of Genesis, near the end of Genesis. I've always been enamored. I've always loved the story of Joseph. I preached some years ago on a series on Joseph. I've just never been able to shake the story of Joseph, what he went through, what he struggled with, his life, his integrity, how God was with him, how God was working everything out, but Joseph couldn't see it in the middle, that between the promise and the payoff, there was a process that he went through, and that process was super painful, and yet God did something amazing at the end. Joseph's story starts as any 17-year-old story starts. He's got a father who loves him, Maybe he loves him and speaks about it a little too much because he says that he loved him more than he loved the rest of his sons. That caused some problems in the rest of the story for Joseph. But his dad loved him. He cared about him. In fact, he gave them this coat. It says this coat of many colors that he wore, meaning like, you are loved. You are my son. You are a promise. God gave you to me. There was this lot of affection that went towards Joseph. And Joseph had a dream that God gave him for his life. In fact, we have this moment where he has multiple dreams as God's giving this just an inkling of his future. He's going to need it because he's going to have to hold on to it. He's going to give an inkling of the future. Like, God's like, I have a purpose for you, a plan for you. I'm going to prosper you. I'm going to use you. Something great's going to come from your life. And as a 17-year-old, he felt that sense of call and purpose, and he was excited about it. He was pumped about it. In fact, God gave him this vision that his family and his brothers and everyone around him were going to be like bowing down to him one day. It's not a good dream to have as a 17-year-old. Like, you're already a little inflated, but like, and so he began to tell everybody, he's like, I had the best dreams anybody could have ever had. And they're like, oh yeah, tell us about it. I'm like, well, you all were bowing down to me. I don't know how that story went, right? And they looked at him like, what? Say that again? He's like, well, I don't know. I mean, that was like, God gave me another one, same thing. You all were bowing down to me, and all these things were happening. And they're like, look, we don't want to hear about those dreams any longer, right? Like, stop with the dreams, Joseph. They take him to his dad, and dad's like, Joseph, am I really going to bow down to you one day? I'm like, I'm your dad. I'm Jacob. I'm wealthy. I'm in charge of all these workers. I'm going to bow down to you. You're one of my youngest sons, right? Joseph's like, I don't know. God gave me this dream. But they began to reject the dream that God had given to Joseph. Begin to say, I don't think that's true. I don't understand it. I don't believe in it. And here's where we begin to make connections with our own life. Because you may not have had the same thing, but maybe you had some hopes and dreams at some point in a life, and someone began to speak into you, or the circumstances around you begin to dash the dreams that you had in your life. I'm going to do this with my life. I'm going to accomplish that with my life. I'm going to be this kind of person. I'm going to do these kind of things with my life. And then the reality set in, and maybe somebody looked at you and said, you know what? That's not true. You're not going to amount to anything. Right? Maybe your brother's going to be somebody. Maybe your sister's going to be somebody, but you're just going to do normal stuff. Like, you're just going to, maybe you'll have a family. Maybe you'll have a job one day. You're not going to do anything great with your life, anything lasting. You're not going to amount to anything. And I know the stories of people even in our church that had parents who said those kind of things over you. And that brings pain, as it brought for Joseph. And so we're going to begin this illustration today. By the way, this is going to get pretty heavy for Brian/Joseph that's here today. And he's going to show us what pain does in our life when we hold on to it. And Joseph's beginning, and it's probably not the only thing that's happened, but this beginning of a story is they didn't accept that he had a call and a purpose on his life. They didn't accept the dream. They rejected it and began to speak against him. And it brings the first moment of separation and pain. You feel that already started? Yeah. Feel that first separation of pain in a relationship that happens for Joseph. Well, that's just the beginning. It's just the start. It's just like that thing deposited in you. Somebody said to you, you're not going to amount to anything. You're not good for anything. You're not my favorite daughter. You're not my favorite son. I wish I hadn't had you. All those kind of things that people can say over people and bring a lot of pain. And then you just begin to carry that in your life and in your heart. Well, Joseph continued on, 17 years old, and at some point, his father says, you know what, your brothers are out in the field, they're doing work, we haven't heard from them for a while, so I want you to go out and find them. In other words, I want you to go spy on your brother. I mean, if things weren't bad enough, I want you to go spy on your brothers and come back and tell me what they're doing, because I'm not sure they're doing the right thing, and then I'll have a conversation with them about what you tell me when you get back. So he goes out. He's like, okay, Dad, sure, I wouldn't mind a tattletale on my brothers. I don't get along with them that well anyway, so I'll go out. I'll see what they're doing. I'll bring you a full report home. And that's exactly what Joseph intends to do. But as he's walking out towards his brothers, they see him in the distance, and they say, you can read it for yourself this week if you want to go back to the story of Joseph. They see him coming. They say, there's that dreamer coming our way. That dreamer who thinks he's better than us, thinks he's got a call in his life, all these things that he's saying. Here comes that dreamer. Let's take him and let's kill him and be done with him. It's hard to put yourself in this story. Because we read it, we're like, wow, okay, that's an interesting detail. His brothers literally were beginning to premeditate murder together that day. The oldest brother steps in and says, look, let's make a compromise. We can't murder our brother. Let's just take him and let's sell him as a slave. Isn't that better? You're like, couldn't we come up with a better compromise than that, right? But that's exactly what they do. Hated by his brothers take Joseph, and the story says they threw him in a cistern, which would have been a large dugout area where they would have stored water. We do things much differently today, but they would have stored their water. It would have been such that he couldn't have gotten back out of it. They strip him of his robe, and they threw him down in the cistern to deal with him later and to debate what's going to happen next in his life. And this is where it begins to connect with all of our stories. Some of us have been hurt by those we trusted most. We just have. Some of the people you thought, they would never hurt me, they end up hurting you, right? The people that you thought you would never hurt, you end up hurting sometimes inadvertently yourself. The people you love, you think, well, maybe these people I don't know, I got to be guarded against, but the people I know well, they'll be always there for them. And yet here Joseph is in the moment with his family surrounded by his brothers, and they're the ones premeditating harm and pain to come into Joseph's life, and they take him in that moment, and they say, Joseph, we don't consider you our brother. We don't love you. We don't care about you. We don't want anything to do with you, and you're lucky we're just going to throw you down a cistern, right? Most of us wanted to murder you. We're going to talk for a little while about what to do with you next, but you just stay down there. In that moment, he takes pain, and not just the pain of the moment, but the pain of the memory that will be with Joseph his whole life about the day his brothers took him out of the field and threw him in the cistern. And that pain gets planted there into Joseph's heart, and it sticks with him for years and years and years. This is the reality of life. And some of us are carrying around not just one moment or two moments, but multiple moments, like Joseph was carrying around in his own life. They take him, they begin to debate what to do, and it says in the text, it says some Midianites, some people from a different place that spoke a different language are coming along. They could tell they're slave traders. They look at the slave traders and say, there's our answer. Well, okay, if we're not going to kill him, and what are we going to do? We can only leave him in here so long. If we're not going to kill him, God send us some slave traders, right? You can think in their head what they're thinking, all the details. Here's our answer. And they take Joseph and they sold him to the Midianites, who then sell him and take him into slavery for the rest of his life. I think just put yourself in the story for a moment if you can. Because you can imagine he's down in the cistern just hoping, crying out, look, I'll do whatever you say. We can make it right. Can't we talk about it? All the things he's doing, crying, yelling for help. He's doing all this conversation, trying to get the attention of any passerby, right? Thinking maybe at some point one of his brothers, Reuben, can you come? Come on, Reuben, come help me. Or Levi, come help me, right? Or Judah, I'm down in the cistern, come help me, right? Hoping that one day they'll just change their mind. What are we doing? We're not doing the right thing. We'll pull him out. And one day they threw some ropes down to him. Begin to pull him out. He's like, okay. They've had second thoughts. Things are going to be right. And as he gets out of the cistern, they take hold of him. They tie him up. And they hand him over to people he can't even speak the language of, who will then take him all the way to Egypt, all the way into slavery forever. The pain of that is just unimaginable. You and I have been hurt by things in our life. We all have. But imagine yourself being sold by your brothers into slavery is so hard to understand for every single one of us. And the pain for Joseph is mounting, right? Short period of time. It's growing, and the pain begins to be deposited in his heart and on his back, just like it is here for Brian here today, who's shouldering the pain of our illustration. So where does he go from there? So Joseph's sold into slavery, and they get down to Egypt. They go down there, and they sell him to this man named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar's a powerful man in the kingdom of Egypt. He works for the Pharaoh. He's got some responsibility. He's probably got a number of slaves, and Joseph goes and lives among people. He doesn't speak their language, doesn't understand their culture. They handle their facial hair differently. They do everything different. They dress different. They talk different. He's an outsider. He's there. He's nothing at the bottom of the totem pole, and there he is in this man named Potiphar's house. But Joseph begins to say, you know what? If this is what it is, then I'm just going to do a good job. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to work hard. And Joseph begins to work hard and harder and harder and harder. And in the story, 10 years fly by. He spends 10 years as a slave to a man named Potiphar, working for Potiphar's goals and Potiphar's dreams, and making them possible and sidelining everything that he thought God had said, but obviously he had thought he had gotten wrong along the way. He's working there, working for Potiphar. Things are getting better, actually. Though he's a slave, he begins to rise in Potiphar's household to just about the most powerful person in Potiphar's household, managing his household. Things are going well until Potiphar's wife, man, things can come out of nowhere. Potiphar's wife sees Joseph and says, Joseph, you're a handsome guy. Like, you work out a lot. You look good. The text itself says that he was a handsome man. He was attractive. So they began to look at him. There you go. Did you? There you go.
I was just trying to
just flex a little. There you go. And she sees him and says, Joseph, she said, come to bed with me. Come sleep with me. Come be with me. Come have sex with me. Probably other people had said yes to her, or at least she thought she could get anyone to say yes to her. He's a slave. He's a nobody. I can ask him to do anything. But Joseph says, how could I do such a thing to my master who's been so good to me, and I'm doing well here, and God is doing things through me, and things are going well, and I have authority, and I have this relationship, and he trusts me, and I trust him. And not only that, but God has been with me. Even though they threw me in a cistern, God has still been with me. How could I do such a thing against God and do what's wrong and would make him look poorly in the eyes of the Egyptians? I cannot do such a thing. You'd think conversation ended, but it says she persisted day after day. Go to bed with me. Go to bed with me. Go to bed with me. The constant drip, and at some point, she encounters him in a place where he can't get away easily, and she grabs hold of his cloak to force this thing to be possible. And it says he runs from the moment, but she has his cloak. God, couldn't you have done it different? Couldn't you have gotten me out of that situation? She has his cloak, and then she begins to create a story. What am I going to explain about this cloak that I have? She says, the man Joseph, your servant, Potiphar, the guy that works for you, he came into my room and he attempted to rape me. He forced himself upon me and I fought off and I grabbed his cloak and he knew he was going to be caught, so he ran from the place, right? Go and get him. And Potiphar goes to Joseph and says, Joseph, I thought I could trust you. I thought you were trustworthy. How can you do this to my wife? And says, you're out of here, right? You're gone from service to me, and takes him and throws him in prison. He's been in a cistern. He's been a slave. He's worked, and now things are going from what was looking better are now going worse. You ever tried to do something right and things just didn't come the right direction from it? Nothing good seemed to come of it. You're trying to treat someone well and they don't receive it. I see it in our house all the time with my young kids, which just tells me it's true of all of humanity, right? Because my young kids, like, sometimes they'll try to, they're trying to help each other, and the other says, don't talk to me, right? They're like, just start trying, because they're used to them also saying mean things to them. So they're now guarded. So when they're trying to say something nice or help them, they try to fend it off, right? That's just happens in life. Sometimes you try to do the right thing. You're not accepted. You're maybe accused of doing the wrong thing, or it looks to others like you're doing the wrong thing, but you're trying to do the right thing. This is what happens for Joseph in the middle of this moment. No fault of his own. You ever had pain happen to you? No fault of your own? I have. Relationship pain, situational pain, physical pain. I've injured myself. No fault of my own. Pain can come from all directions, even when we're not creating it. That's what happens for Joseph. He's doing everything right as he should, and pain comes in his direction in a hurry. So there he is, working for Potiphar, thrown into prison. In fact, it says that he's thrown into prison for 3 years in the story. 3 years, hopeless. Like, I'm never going to get out of here. He doesn't know how long he'll be there, but we know it was 3 years. It's a really painful time. What happened in the prison? What other pain came from the prison? I'm sure a lot of pain came from the prison. And the reality is that the pain in his life and the things that he's gone through, they're beginning to mount up. There's things not ever told in the story, things that have happened to Joseph, things that he's gone through, struggles that he's endured. It's getting heavier, isn't it? This is our life. This is our stories. And your pain is different than Joseph's pain, but it's just like Joseph's pain. And it weighs you down in the same way that it weighed Joseph down. It's now he's in prison waiting there. And he actually speaks to a cupbearer to make everything worse. A cupbearer gets put into the prison who has a dream. And they're like, we kind of heard about there's a dreamer that stays here, right? Who hears from God. Like, maybe he can help you. And the cupbearer goes to him, and Joseph helps. Even though he has got all this pain, all these things have been wrongdoing that's done against him, he still helps this man, this cupbearer. And he says, you know what? I'll seek God for you. I'll seek him. I'll pray about it. He said, the only thing I ask, and he begins to give them the answer. He's like, by the way, it's good news. What I've heard from God, it's good news. You're getting out of here. You're going to go back to Pharaoh. Everything's going to go right for you. I don't know that it's going to go right for me, but it's going to go right for you. God hasn't told me, but he's told me about you, and it's going to go well for you. He said, the only thing I ask is that when things go well for you, that you would remember me. Because I'm the guy that helps everyone, but everyone seems to harm them. The pain of that continues the journey for Joseph. You know what? I was thinking, Brian, isn't it true? Like, when you have that much pain on you, that much weight on you, isn't it hard not to blame somebody for that? I think all of it that's happened for Joseph all goes back to the beginning when they rejected him and threw him in a cistern. If they hadn't done that, then I would have never met Potiphar's wife. I'd never be in this prison. I'd never be giving my life now, at this point, a good 13 years later, still doing these things. I wouldn't be here. It's hard not to hold a grudge, as we're saying this morning, against somebody when that happens for us. The reality is, here's one of my main points that I want to get across today, and it's shown through Brian here. Pain is a heavy burden to carry for a lifetime. Now, you have this for about 20 minutes here today, right? 15, 20 minutes. And it's getting heavier, isn't it? I know, because I tested this out on myself to try to figure out how many stones could I put in before he just fell over. Isn't that like life? How much pain can you put in before you just can't go any further? And not only that, isn't it like life? I can handle it for a little while. But pain is a heavy burden to carry for a lifetime. And some of us, I've been praying this week for all of you that are in this room. I'm just believing that some of you have a lot of weight on you. You got some things that have happened to you. Some of it's no fault of your own. You were just there, and this happened, and that pain has been deposited on your back and on your heart, and you're carrying it. I just want to say this morning, that pain is not going to lead you in any good directions. This pain wears you out. It harms your relationships. It harms every interaction you have with others. It harms your ability to trust, your ability to love other people. It harms your ability to open your heart to other people. When you continue to carry it, all you can think is, they did this to me. They did this to me. They did this to me. And they did this to me makes you scan every other relationship and say, but what if they do something else to me? This is enough. The pain and the burden of life. The reality is, life is too short to carry that, isn't it? I mean, today would be too long to carry that all day. That would wear you out. Life is too short to carry the burden of pain and unforgiveness. Let's put the backpack down. Let's give Brian a break, and let's put our hands together for Brian. That's heavy. It's like a good 30, 40 pounds right there this morning. Pain is too heavy a burden to carry for a lifetime. I've been riding my bike recently, trying to get a little more exercise. I go through seasons. Maybe you're like me, where I go through seasons. I exercise a lot, and then I go through seasons like, I'm just a little busy this week. It's like a little busy the next week. I'm a little tired this week. I'm still tired. Now I just have other things I want to do. You know, those kind of things like mount up, and you wake up like 9 months, 10 months later, you're like, I just really haven't exercised at all other than playing with my kids at home. And so I thought, you know, the weather's good. It's time to get outside. And so I pulled my bike out. I had to dust it off. The tires were totally flat on my bike, like totally on the ground. So I began to fix that, and I got riding, and the weather's been great, so it's been a lot of fun. So I've been riding on the trails here around Tulsa, and we have a lot of great trails all around Tulsa. How many of you ride a bike around town sometimes? Yes? It's a lot of fun. So I've been riding down this trail down south of the turnpike that goes out towards Broken Arrow, and it's a beautiful area. You go through a lot of different sections, and there's this one section where I've gone through, and the first time I rode just a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and I rode through there, I was like, what is that on the fence? And I got closer. I'm going to show a picture here this morning of what is on the fence. I took a picture this week so that I could share it with you. This is what is on the fence. A bird apparently was flying by. And I don't know if like a strong gust of wind got it, if he dove a little too steeply, what happened, but he caught himself on that fence. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, maybe he's still alive. And then I'm like, am I really going to try and free the bird from the fence? Like, is this going to go well, right? You ever have those thoughts about, like, should I really get involved? I'm not sure. And then there's a whole Samaritan story. And I'm like, God, what do you want me to do? It's like very confusing up there. And so I rode by. And so he had flown by, apparently, and he got caught on the fence. And he's not alive anymore. He died there. He got so stuck in the moment that he never got out of it again, ensnared by his own pain and what happened to him. I don't know how he got there. Pretty impressive, actually. He flew with enough force to impale himself upon that fence. And he's never coming off it again unless somebody pulls him off. Ensnared in the moment. You know what the reality is? Joseph and you and I, there is a great likelihood that if we don't fight against it, we're going to get ensnared in moments in our life. The pain is going to be great, and it's going to be hard not to get off it, but we're going to get stuck in a moment. And if you get stuck in that moment, you're never going to be able to move forward and be the person that God has called you to be. And you think of Joseph carrying this backpack. You can see how much it weighs, right? It's heavy. The pain he was going through, he could have gotten so stuck in his moment. He could have carried that pain and thought, I don't know, I can't forgive them. They've never come and asked forgiveness. They've never been contrite. They've never said sorry. They've never come and repaid me for all that I went through. Potiphar's never called me, said, I'm sorry, I realized later that my wife was doing this with other people, right? My brothers have never come found me. Dad never came rescued me. I've been in Egypt all these years. What's happened? Has everyone forgotten me? And he could have been, just like that bird, stuck in that moment forever. But this is what the amazing part of the story of Joseph is that Joseph chooses to not allow himself to be stuck forever in the moment. And what happens is his brothers eventually, God does amazing story, I won't tell the whole story, where God, the cupbearer, eventually remembers Joseph 3 years later. Like 1 year would have been better, a couple of months would have been better, but just like, well, I'll take whatever I can get. And Pharaoh has a dream, and the cupbearer says, I think I know a guy who can interpret dreams. I forgot about him. It's like, oh, and I promised him I'd remember. He's probably okay, right? No big deal. Tells Pharaoh to go find him. Joseph comes out, clean Joseph up, out of the prison. He prays to God. God gives him the interpretation of the dream. Says, Pharaoh, famine's coming, big famine. We got to start saving a lot of money, a lot of resources, because the famine that's coming will kill the whole known world at that time if we don't do something about it. God has warned you. He's warned you multiple times because it is sure and is going to happen. Pharaoh says, wow, would you come to work for me? And Joseph said, of course. I'd love to get out of the prison. Goes to work for Pharaoh. About 10 years later, if we got our timelines right, 10 years after he gets out of working for Potiphar, he's there and his brothers show up because food is dried up in Israel as well. And they're at the risk of starvation themselves. And they go, and the father says, you need to run to Egypt. I hear they have food. Somebody's doing something right. And they go to Egypt, and they show up right in front of Joseph. It's just the craziest story of everything coming full circle. And they bow down. Remember the dream? They bow down before this great ruler in Egypt who's second in command to Pharaoh himself. They bow down before him and said, oh, great, whatever they would have said, I can just rehearse in my mind. Oh, great ruler, we're in desperate need of food. Would you be so gracious to us to help us? And Joseph's sitting there knowing they don't recognize me because I look totally different than I used to. And the dream is coming true. I thought that dream was dead. The dream's coming true. And Joseph spends time with them, and he has to ask himself the question, what am I going to do with all this pain? What am I going to do with all this pain that I'm carrying around, right? All this pain they did to me, they're responsible for everything I'm carrying around. What am I going to do with all this pain? They're standing in front of me. I could do anything I want, right? I bet he's rehearsed some conversation. You ever been hurt by somebody and you just think, if I ever run into them and we get to have a conversation, I'm going to say this and they're going to say that and I'm going to rebut them and say, no, but you didn't understand. Or rehearse. I mean, he's had 20 years or so to rehearse this thing in his head. And there they are in front of him. He never thought he'd actually see them. And he could do anything he wants. He said, you threw me in a cistern, I could throw you in a dungeon. I know a lot of prisons to throw you in. I have some experience with those things. He could probably take their life. It'd be no big deal for him to explain to the Egyptians, they're traitors, they're Hebrews, they're traitors. We can take their life. Sure, Joseph, do whatever you want to do, right? What's he going to do with his pain that he's carrying around? That's where we get Genesis chapter 45, verse 1 through 8, here at the end of my message here today. It says, then Joseph could no longer control himself. He's been talking with them, spending time with them. It says, before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. It's a big deal. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him. I don't blame them, because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. It is the reality. The pain is the pain. The reality is the reality. We don't have to pretend like nothing happened. You sold me into slavery in Egypt. And now, this is what he's going to do with his pain. Do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance, a great salvation. Verse 8, so then it was not you who sent me here. Wow, this is just totally hard to understand. But God, he made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Verse 14, this is what he does with all his pain. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him weeping. Verse 15, and he kissed all his brothers. He forgives them. And he wept over them. And afterward, his brothers talked with him. See, I think what Joseph would say if he was right here, he'd say, Brad, life's too short to hold a grudge. And life's too short to carry the pain, right? Life's too short. And not only is life too short to carry all that burden on yourself, but God's too good not to trust that even what has been done to me, even if it was for my harm, that he could turn it for good. God's just too good. And that God always has his hands on all the things that are around us. And I think Joseph took his backpack that day, he took it and he said, I'm done carrying it, right? I'm done. I'm not going to carry it any longer. It's time to empty this backpack and let everything, if I can, even that one, fall to the floor. See, this is what forgiveness does. When we forgive someone else, we set ourselves free. And Joseph said, I'm not sure you guys deserve it. You sold me into slavery, but I've had time to think about it, and you know what? I don't want to carry it anymore. I want to be free too. I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to trust that God got me exactly where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there to keep you alive. You guys who threw me in the cistern, God put me through all of that to keep you and your children alive. It's just a very ironic story, he must think, but he said, you know what? But I don't want to carry the pain anymore. It's time to let it go. And I think Joseph would say to all of us, if he could just sit down with me and sit down with you, he said, what's hurts? What have you been through? I think he'd just say, I get it. That is painful. What was done to you is sin. They sinned against you. They harmed you. It wasn't right. But don't let it stay with you the way it wants to. It's time to let it go. I think God wants to say to all of us, enough is enough. It ends here. Joseph said to them, enough is enough. It ends here. My family, the cycle of pain is not going to continue. Even though you hurt me, I'm not going to hurt other people as a result of it. I'm not going to hurt you back. I could, but I'm not going to. That cycle of pain, anybody ever heard hurt people? Hurt people? Maybe one of the most true human idioms that we've ever created. Hurt people, hurt people. You know, the reality is those brothers were hurt a bit by dad who favored Joseph. Got to be careful as parents. Hurt people, hurt Joseph. And Joseph, if he stays on the track that most of humans stay on, he's a hurt person, and what's he going to do? He's going to hurt people. And then what are those hurt people going to do? They've been hurt, and they're going to hurt people. And I think Joseph makes a statement. He draws a line in the sand. He says, enough is enough with all the pain and all the hurt. It ends here. I'm changing the future by God's grace. I'm cutting it off. I'm not going to be a hurt person who hurts people. I'm going to be a hurt person who forgives people. And in the forgiving of that, I'm going to cut off the line of destruction that comes out of pain and out of hurt. And you have that opportunity too. You say, well, they don't deserve it. Maybe they don't. They probably don't. And maybe there's nothing they can say that would make it right what they did to you, but you just don't want to be that person on that road carrying that weight any longer. And forgiveness sometimes is about them being forgiven, and sometimes it's about you being free. And Joseph says, I didn't know what to do when you came and I saw you for the first time, but God showed me what to do. It's time to cry about the pain, call it what it is. You sold me into slavery, but I forgive you, and it's time to move forward together. What an amazing story, isn't it? You know what I love about the Bible? The Bible is, the Word of God is living and active. It's not just a story. It's like, do you feel it in the room? The story's still alive because God, by his grace, has put his hand upon it. The story of Joseph teaches me today to forgive, that I can be free. And that's an amazing thing. So close the message today. Why did Jesus come to earth? What a great question. Jesus came to earth to forgive the sins of his enemies because we had done so much harm against him, rebelled against him, stood against him. He's trying to help us. He's trying to stand with us. We pushed back, we rejected, and he came to earth to forgive Brad of his sins, to forgive Pat of his sins, to forgive every one of us of our sins in this room, Crystal and Andrew and Brian and Craig and so many of us, to forgive us, Jack, of our sins. That's what he came. And to give us a new way to live. And so now, as a person who's received grace, received forgiveness, now he's changed me. And it's not automatic, but he's enabled me to have the power to live differently than I used to live, where I would have betrayed a betrayer. I would have harmed someone who harmed me. I would have hurt someone who hurt me. That's who I was, but the old person has died and a new person's come in his place, and I still have choices to make. But God's now empowered me by his Spirit to now have the ability to empty my backpack and let things go and forgive those who harmed me. That's why Jesus came, to make a new way to live and to help us to receive forgiveness in our own life. And I just think that's the most life-changing thing, the world-changing thing that could have ever happened for any of us. I've been praying all week for everybody in this room today. I don't know all your stories. I know some of your stories. I don't know all your stories. But I know, because you're a human like me, that you've gone through pain. And all I've been praying all week is, God, will you help somebody that's just went to church on Sunday? Will you help them empty their backpack and go home different? That's why I've been praying all week. And some of you, God would just say to you, I know it's painful. There may not be deserving of forgiveness, but just walk in grace, because it's just a better way to live. Be free. Don't hold it any longer. Don't try to just be stronger, because every day you're going to get weaker, and it's going to be harder to love people and trust people, and it's going to destroy the whole rest of your life. Just empty your backpack. I've been praying all week. God, help somebody to empty their backpack, whatever it is. Got one thing, 10 things, 20 things, 50 years of things. Empty your backpack. If you empty your backpack, you can leave here freer than you've been in a really long time. And that's the good news of the gospel, that you even can be free today. Amen? That's good stuff. Let's stand to our feet and let's pray. Let's seek God on this topic today.